How's it going, everybody? Back again with another Fly Tie Thursdays. Tonight we're going to be doing a pretty common fly. I would say it's probably everybody's first fly they learn how to tie, or one of the first 2 or 3 that they learn how to tie. If you fly fish in freshwater, you need to know how to tie them. It's a woolly bugger. Yeah, everybody's probably seen them, fished them at least once in their life. They're pretty much a staple from everything from its beginnings in trout fishing all the way to, it's one of my favorite flies to throw at smallmouth, largemouth, tie 'em real small. Your panfish will hit them. Carp love woolly buggers. Honestly, you name it. I've caught catfish on woolly buggers while fishing for smallmouth. You name it, a freshwater fish, they will eat a woolly bugger. You can tie them in a variety of colors, sizes. The difference in the way you retrieve them can make them imitate a little bit of everything. They're really just a very, very, very versatile pattern. We'll go ahead and get started. The size I'm going to tie tonight is the size 6. That's a little bit bigger than most people like to throw for an all-around trout bugger, but it's still a very versatile size. It's kind of the beginning or to the middle size of what I like to throw at smallmouth. It might be on the small side. It's a good size to throw at carp. It's a good all-around versatile size. The hook that we're going to be using is an Allen S402. This hook is actually listed as a 2X long. I like to use a 3X long hook for woolly buggers, but this hook, for whatever reason, matches up with most 3X long hooks on the market, so that's why I use it. They have the S403, that is what they call a 3X long, and it's just a hair longer. You can use those as well. They work out just fine. And we're going to be tying the bead head version tonight. So the beads that I'm using are Allen, just brass beads. They're the 4.8 millimeter size. That's what matches up with a size 6 hook pretty well. Before we even do anything, go ahead and thread our bead onto our hook. And I like to, when I tie a bead head bugger, it's usually because it's going to be heavy and I need it to get down. So I'll take some .02 lead wire and wrap, a good amount of turns. I don't usually count them. I just kind of eyeball it. And this is just for additional weight. This ends up being about, the same amount of weight as what's already in that bead, if not a little bit more. Slide it all the way up, snug it up behind the bead, and maybe even wrap a couple more wraps on there. You can also just kind of twist the lead. It'll help you wrap it on there quicker and break it off. I like to go pretty much, maybe just a hair past halfway down the shank. The thread I like to use for this fly is UTC 140 in olive. I don't like to use a particularly heavy thread for buggers unless I'm tying really big ones. Like I've tied buggers all the way up to a 1/0. That's when I use that heavy thread, but typically most sizes of 140 works out fine. What you want to do, just kind of wrap over your lead, build up a little thread dam behind your lead so it doesn't try to slide on you, and then just kind of cover it up. I don't have too much trouble with lead spinning on these because I try to bite my thread down into some of those creases in the lead. That keeps it from spinning. You could take like a brushable super glue and brush it over the lead if you wanted. That would keep it in place just as well. So after we have all that done, first step is going to be our tail. Your tail for your woolly bugger is marabou. The one we're going to tie tonight is just straight olive. So I like to tie just regular olive marabou. With a size 6, you're pretty much going to need a full plume of marabou. My marabou is a little bit ratty, so I kind of combined a few clumps to make a nice pre-made tail, just so speed the video up a little bit. This is an area of the woolly bugger that's really up to a lot of discretion. It's kind of, everybody has their own opinion. I like the tail length to be about a shank length, maybe just a touch longer for one as big as a 6. I don't like it to be much longer than that. I know some people who like to have them 2 times the body length. I have a real problem with fish short striking them when it's that long. But for me, what I like is a tail length about 1 shank in length. And I like them to be pretty fluffy because marabou does lay down a lot when it's in the water. So go ahead, measure out your tail, and 1 or 2 loose wraps, and then bite it down to the hook shank tight. And I like to wrap it up, wrap that marabou up and cover it up to or just right behind the bead at least, and get in there with your scissors, cut it off. Let's see. There we go. Now, Next step, this is also, there's a bunch of ways to tie a woolly bugger, but this way I think always makes them look the best. It is one extra step in the process, but I think it does make the bugger look a lot better and come out a lot nicer. Get some copper wire, either regular copper, or in this case I'm using olive brassy size wire. It's just going to match the color of the body. The wire is going to help us rib through the hackle at the end, you'll see. So just tie in a piece of copper wire down the hook. Doesn't really have to be pretty, just tie it in. I like to keep it on the near side or the same side as the hook as I am. Cut that off with your junk scissors. Don't really measure it out, just kind of, 4 inches, 5 inches of wire is all you really need. Just let that hang. If you've got a material clip, you can use it. I don't really use mine very much, but I just let that wire hang. After we get our copper wire tied in, your next step is going to be your body material, whether it be chenille, crystal chenille, or in this case, over the years, I don't typically tie a bunch of bland woolly buggers, just regular chenille buggers anymore. I like to tie crystal buggers or sparkle buggers. I always seem to have better luck on those. But over the years, I've recently been switching to tying buggers with ice dubbing. I really like it because it gives you the ability to, really fatten up the body, really thin or slim down the body. It's got just the right amount of sparkle. By the time you wrap your hackle through there, it really dulls it down, and it's just the right amount. And you can use laser dub, you can use all these different dubbins that are on the market, and it really allows you to control that body size. Because what I don't like is when you use a pre-made woolly bugger chenille, or some of these chenilles that are on the market, they tend to make the body really fat, and I don't really like a woolly bugger to be fat. I like them to be slimmer, or just about the same diameter as the bead. And one trick I will tell you, if you do choose to use ice dubbing, hold it up to the light before you actually choose what color you're going to look at. I mean, if you look at this dubbing just in the light, it looks like it's much brighter and a lighter color than this, and that's just the way the camera's going to make it look. But when you hold it up to the light and look at it, it is actually almost identical color to our tail material. The olive is what I'm going to use. They also make another color called olive brown, which really looks good on an olive woolly bugger as well. But for this one, we're just going to be using the straight olive. Get your thread to the back of the hook, right in front of the marabou tail, right where we tied in that copper wire. Take a good little bit of ice dubbing. That's a lot. There we go. And that's the good thing. Another good thing with this is you can always add more, or take a little bit off as you need it. I usually just wet my index finger and my thumb and just twist this stuff onto the hook. It's very thin fibers in this material, so you don't really have to wax it, in my opinion. I think it goes on fine just wet. And don't worry about how uniform the little dubbing noodle is. You're going to be wrapping over it multiple times. So once you get that wrapped, start working that up the body of the fly. If you notice your noodle's kind of getting loose as you're wrapping, just reach up and tighten it up a little bit. Let's see, there we go. Shorten the thread up here. Naturally, this ice dub doesn't want to cooperate with me, but there we go. I used a little too much in that first pinch. You don't really want to use a ton at first. Just, like I said, you can layer it on there. You can keep adding it on, and it's going to cover up your thread wrap, so you're not really going to notice that there's a seam or somewhere where you added more dubbing. But work our way up, and even then, after that big clump, I still need to add more. And it's a rotary vise helps with these, because I like to look at these flies on all 4 sides and make sure it that all that thread is getting covered up, because you don't want to have that thread line showing in the middle of the fly. That doesn't look very good. Granted, once probably just me being picky, but you don't want all that. The reason I like this ice dub too is, even though it is a synthetic, the fibers are so thin, it's actually a really buggy, really buggy dubbing. It's really prickly, and even with that hackle wrapped around it, you still got all these little fibers sticking out. I'm going to do one more thin little line back and work my way back up front. You know, using this dubbing, it does take a little bit longer to tie these flies, but in the long run, they come out looking a lot better, in my opinion. And I seem to catch more fish on them as well. I think they just look 100 times better in the water because they're not overly sparkly or they're not overly flashy like most of your regular crystal buggers are. Here we go. Just one more little pinch. I'll use it to jump my thread back to the front. So our next step, you can get your hackle out. For hackles on these flies, you can use a regular saddle hackle. Just, you know, buy a pack of saddle hackles from your fly shop or whatever local fly shop you have, or whatever website you like to order your materials from. That body came out really good. But what I like to do is I like to get the bugger packs of hackles. They're a little expensive off the bat. They're usually about 20 bucks. But you get basically two pieces of hackles, or 2 chunks of hackles this size. And you can see, I mean, there's a lot of hackles in there. And you don't only have to use them for buggers. They're really nice because they have a nice taper to them. And the hackles, pretty much every single hackle is perfect for tying woolly buggers. Like, this is the one I selected earlier. If you wanted to tie, let's say, like a size 1/0 or a 2, you know, all the way down to a 2/0, maybe, I wouldn't go much bigger than that, but you can see the butt of it's really thick. You could start a big woolly bugger here, but you get down here and you could tie some really small ones. All these hackles are pretty much hand selected to be used for woolly buggers, and I use them as tail feathers for, you know, some longer predator flies and stuff like that too, and they work great for that as well. For this fly, what I like to do, we're going to tie our hackle in here and work our hackle back, and that's where this copper wire will come in, and you'll see that in just a second. So what I like to do with this hackle is kind of measure it out, just lay it over your fly and see what it's going to look like and see where you want to tie it in, just to judge what your collar length's going to look like. And that's about right for me. Kind of compress the fibers in that area so you know where to cut it and tie it in. So just strip the butt section of that hackle off, and you're tying it in the thick end at the head of the fly. Lay it on the near side of the hook, and what I like to do is kind of just use that gap that's already there between the bead and the material, and use that to kind of suck the butt of that hackle inside the fly. It pulls it in and it actually protects that tie-in point really, really well. Bite it down in there behind the bead, couple wraps on each side. Make sure not to trap any of those hackle fibers if you don't have to. Won't really hurt anything, but just try not to, I guess. There we go. Now we'll leave our thread up front and we'll start to work our hackle backwards. This is what's going to help that hackle when you're fishing this fly to actually lay down backwards. Some people, before they dub the body, they'll just tie the hackle in here, wrap the hackle forward. It works. It's a quick way to tie a woolly bugger, but these end up coming out a lot nicer and they look a lot better. So what I like to do when I'm palmering this hackle, I like to do one full turn behind the bead before I even begin heading back. That way it gets a nice round collar right behind the bead. And then the main thing is just make sure you're evenly spacing your wraps all the way back. Trying not to, you know, have them too far apart, not too close together, just evenly spacing them all the way to the back of the fly. Some people like to use hackle pliers here. Once again, it's kind of just up to your own discretion. I don't use hackle pliers very often on a bugger this size. On a small one like a 12 or a 14 I might. This size I don't seem to need them. What you do now, you got your hackle back there. Well, how do I tie it in? That's what the copper wire is for. You pull that hackle tight to you, towards you, and take that copper wire and capture the tip of that hackle with the copper wire. I like to usually do 1 or 2 tight wraps in the back right there over that tip of that hackle, just so I know she's not going anywhere. After we've done that, you take your copper wire and you start going up the fly. Now a trick when you're going up, you want to do like you did with the hackle, keeping those even wraps going up, even spacing, but you don't want to capture too many of the hackle fibers. So what you can do is as you're wrapping, just kind of wiggle it down in there like this, and it prevents you from capturing any more of those fibers than you have to. It's kind of hard to avoid capturing, not capturing any of them, but this will really limit how many you capture. And this is where having that wire the same color as the body really helps, because you don't really see that counter rib going forward. And since we are counter ribbing it, we're going, the exact opposite direction that the feather was wrapped. Every single time it goes around, this is binding that feather to the body, so it's making the fly more durable as well, which is just another benefit of doing them this way. So now eventually you'll work your wire all the way up to the head, up by the bead. Go ahead and capture that with your thread. You can stroke your hackle fibers back here and just kind of, get everything out the way so you can capture that wire. After you've captured it, I like to stroke everything back, including the wire, and get a good base of thread right there on top of the wire as well. Now, you can cut it off, or if you've tied it in good, you should be able to helicopter it off, like so. Just kind of sit here and spin it till it breaks off. There it goes. And that'll break it off clean right at the tie-in point, so you don't have a little tag in when you try to snip it with your scissors. The only thing really left to do is, this is where having a real sharp, almost needle tip pair of scissors helps. You've got to cut the very tip of that hackle out where you captured it with the copper wire. So just hold that in your hand, pull it up, get in there real close, and snip it out. You got a nice symmetrical bugger where the hackle, the natural shape of the hackle is to go backwards already. Now all that's left to do is whip finish right behind the bead, and I like to just kind of use 3 fingers, pull everything out of the way, and go ahead, throw down 4, 5, 6 whip finishes, and that is it. Cut our tag end off close, coat it with your head cement of choice, and that is your woolly bugger. When you're coating with your head cement, be sure not to get, it's hard to avoid sometimes getting it into the hackles, but try not to get into the hackle. So another thing you can do after you're finished with the fly, you've already coated it with your head cement, or even before, it doesn't matter. You can take a small brush, whether it be a toothbrush, or the actual fly for this is like a dubbing brush, but it's basically the same thing as one of these. It's just like a makeup brush. They're like $1 or something at most department stores. You can just take it and just kind of rough up the sides of the fly. Don't worry if it pulls the tail up in there. And what it'll do, it'll pull some of that ice dubbing out and give it even more of a buggy look, and maybe just a touch bit more flash as well. You can use kind of the prickly side of this brush too, and it helps. And that is the finished fly. They really come out looking good when you use these bugger style hackles like this, the actual hackles that are purpose built to tie woolly buggers, and then the ice dub, in my opinion, makes a bugger look 100 times better. And when you tie them this way, you're wrapping the hackle back and you're taking your copper wire and you're counter ribbing it up. That way, while you're fishing this, the hackle is already designed to lay back down. Sometimes the woolly buggers that you tie where you wrap your hackle forward, the natural tendency of that hackle doesn't want to lay back because you're wrapping it towards the head. It's just a different presentation altogether. What I consider a woolly bugger and what I like to fish, this is what I like. So that's it for the woolly bugger. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments or about the materials or anything about the video, feel free to ask them below and I'll be happy to get to them. And that's it. Tight lines.